Darksiders Genesis is an interesting little game, because if you know the Darksiders series and you were to look at this at a glance, you might think it's a departure for the series. Previous Darksiders games, Darksiders 2, and begrudgingly Darksiders 3, are action-adventure games, heavily inspired by The Legend of Zelda in terms of structure, and titles like God of War in terms of combat. Now, some people think it's a very derivative series. I've always quite liked it, except for Darksiders 3. But this, you look at it and you think, well, this doesn't look like Darksiders in terms of presentation, with its pulled-back camera and sort of these tiny little character models on the screen. You'd think you were looking at something that was trying to ape Diablo. When you first look at Darksiders Genesis, you do indeed think that it's, one of those hack and slashy, dungeon crawly, loot-based RPG experiences. The issue is it's not that. When you actually play Darksiders Genesis, what you get is, well, a Darksiders game with a pulled-back camera. In terms of mechanics and combat, not a lot has changed. The vast majority of the game you spend going from place to place, fighting demons, performing finishing executions on them. Many, many, many finishing executions. In fact, if you perform an execution move, it's just a button press when you've weakened them, on one enemy, it will deal damage to the others and open them up for executions, and then you just go on a chain. It's not exactly mechanically rewarding to just press a button over and over again, but from a visual and feedback, from audio-visual feedback perspective, there is something quite interesting and gratifying about just going from enemy to enemy, either shooting them in the face or kicking them very, very far. There are some puzzles to solve, but again, they ape what we've seen in the Darksiders series, just reinforcing the fact that this is a genuine Darksiders game mechanically, just with this strange new presentation, this new style. The puzzles themselves are, well, pretty much straight from the series, which was itself straight from games like The Legend of Zelda. So you've got War's Glaive, which behaves very much like Link's boomerang in Zelda. You can use it to light fires by bringing fire from one place to another. You can use that in turn to ignite bombs, to blow up things that are blocking your way. The character Strife can use certain glyphs on the wall to open up portals from one place to another, which again is used for puzzle solving, getting things to places they couldn't ordinarily reach, including the characters, etc. Really simple puzzles, Stuff we've all seen before, in fact, in this very series, but it's fine. The game itself is fine. You can choose between War, which was the protagonist of the first game, and Strife, who is playable for the very first time. You can do that in co-op if you want, one character to each player, or you can switch between two characters on the fly if you're playing on your own. If you've played the first Darksiders, then War plays like War. He's big, he's heavy, he's got a massive fuck-off sword. He can grab enemies and pull them towards him with a big ghostly hand, and perform massive, big, devastating attacks. Strife, on the other hand, is smaller, lighter, lither, fights with two guns primarily, which you can fire in a twin-stick shooter kind of style. He gets access to more roguish abilities. He can create a shadow duplicate of himself. He can throw down caltrops on the floor. Both War and Strife can get access to more moves, more combos, more abilities as the game progresses, and as they spend souls and other materials. Both characters play quite differently, but pretty well. The game's quite good, really. I wasn't expecting much. I was expecting something done on the cheap. And it still kind of is. I mean, you look at the production values in the original, let's say, 2 Darksiders games, and you compare it to this, and yeah, the budget looks like it's been scaled back dramatically. At least I hope it is. If this cost more than any of the other Darksiders games, then someone needs to have a word. But all told, this is fine. This is an inoffensive Darksiders game with this pulled-back camera, which does have its problems. Let's not beat around the bush. First of all, they've still tried to put platforming in this game, and the angle at which the camera is, that pulled back thing and the tiny little characters, and the propensity for bits of the scenery to get into the way of the visuals, that's really annoying. I have fallen off ledges more times than I care to count in this game. There's also often so much going on the screen at once that when you combine it with the tiny little character models, it can be quite hard to follow what the hell's going on. There are also moments where the game's clearly a little rough around the edges. Sometimes executions don't quite work. You'll be pressing the button, but your character won't be doing anything. You will often get yourself caught on a little bit of the scenery. Characters can sometimes struggle to reach a ledge. I think a little bit of a climb up a ledge animation would have been nice if you get near enough to an edge, because sometimes you just feel like there's an invisible wall getting in your way. Certain jumps that you're sure you should have made but didn't. And seriously, if you are going to make the game look superficially like a Diablo or a Torchlight, don't put in your old Prince of Persia stuff, don't put in wooden beams that we've got to jump on and jump from. It just doesn't quite work, and it feels weird and wrong. Also, a lot of the exposition takes place in the void, which is very echoey, and they've decided to put lots of dialogue in this really echoey place, and they've layered the reverb effects on it. So, like, if you think the reverb in this place right now is bad, and apologies for that, by the way, we're still getting set up here, so it's a little bit echoey. But if you think this is bad, you should see, it's borderline unlistenable. And they've put so much of the narrative dump in this void area where they've layered on this extreme amount of echo that just gets really annoying and causes me to read the text as fast as possible on screen so I can skip the dialogue. Now, I thought I had some footage of this dialogue in the void to show you, but I apparently didn't get it or save it. However, there is a piece of dialogue not in the void but uses the same echo effect, so you can hear exactly how bad it sounds.
Right. Unless this thing somehow transforms unlimited power and uses it to enslave the universe. Your imagination is exhausting. Hey, it could happen.
It's a strange way to deliver a remarkable amount of your dialogue, but there you go. So, the game has a lot of caveats, a lot of things I could complain about, many nitpicks. It is fine, though. It's not a great game. It's certainly not a particularly brilliant Darksiders game, but it's a fuck-sight better than Darksiders 3 was. That certainly set my expectations super low, so I was pleasantly surprised to find a game that plays fairly decently. With these two characters, one of which is familiar, one of which isn't, and both of them play quite well. It's got a nice speed to it, does the combat, quite a few systems and abilities and moves to play with. So yeah, I'm impressed a bit, but as I said, it does look like a hack and slashy, dungeon crawly, loot-driven RPG, except it isn't. And that's strange to me, and it does reinforce the idea that this one was done a bit on the cheap, because why make it look like this if you're not going to make it play like it looks? This is especially glaring when you consider that Darksiders 2 was loot-driven. There were loot drops, as well as the Zelda-inspired dungeons and whatnot. So it's strange that they've done none of that here. You do not unlock new gear, like new guns and swords for the characters. You collect various pickups that charge your special moves and your currency that you use to buy and unlock moves. Very similar, once again, to Darksiders, the mainline series. You go see the character Volgrim and you spend money, souls rather, on new equipment and items. There aren't loot drops in the world itself. Don't go in expecting anything like Diablo, because it's not. It is more Darksiders that is aping the presentation style of Diablo and, you know, similar games in the genre. And there seems no clear-cut creative reason for it. If there was a creative reason for this, I feel like they would have done something creative with it. So it does seem like the decision was far more pragmatic than artistic. Especially with this game's focus on co-op, which is about the only really justifiable reason for the game looking the way it does. I just can't help but think that when Darksiders had a bigger budget way back in the day, years and years and years ago, if this game had come out looking the way it did, we would have had a full-bore Diablo-inspired game. With the 4 Horsemen as playable characters, all 4 of them, with 4-player co-op, and loot, and champions, and replayable dungeons, all of the good stuff. But then again, the Darksiders series never really made quite enough money to justify its budget, so we will never get that. But it's a shame, because Darksiders as a series has a reputation, in my opinion, a decent reputation, for aping many, many other games, and doing them quite well. So I would not be against the idea of a, you know, an actual dungeon crawling RPG with the Darksiders flair all over it. I mean, it worked for Silent Hill. Actually, it didn't work for Silent Hill. That game wasn't particularly great, but, you know, it could have worked. Maybe? Did anyone else play that PS Vita Silent Hill RPG? So that's Darksiders Genesis. It's more Darksiders, it's better than Darksiders 3, and it doesn't play how it looks like it should play, but it does play how the series should play. So it's unique in that way, and strange, but ultimately it's just a decent, solid enough action game with some flaws, some pretty notable flaws, but overall it's satisfying enough. It will, you know, it'll distract you for a few hours if you want. It's fine, and it's better than Darksiders 3. I'm not sure if I've said that yet. Better than Darksiders 3.